I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods. Yeah, one in particular, I'm just a messenger. Let me just pass on the rock. Browning, brunning, pruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box, and you cannot compare them at all. So don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, yeah. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, woo. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Fantasy Football Roundtable Podcast. And boy, has the legal tampering period produced some fun returns. We started getting deals even before that, the end of last week and over the weekend, but it was nothing like the onslaught we have experienced these last 2 days, and the league year hasn't even officially begun. That will be tomorrow. There are so many free agent deals to talk about. I abandoned the notion we were going to talk about any of the defensive deals today. Dennis, that page is a mile long. At this rate, I have to look the fine print. Have you also deal maybe?
Dude, the free agency flirtation period has been bonkers. Like, hopefully they're doing digital signings tomorrow, because we may cut more trees down than the Amazon rainforest the way we're dealing contracts out. It's crazy.
Well, and
fantasy football is overtaking the NFL. Like, trade deadlines in the NFL matter now. Teams are making deals, and they're going for it.
The money is free flowing. Like, in the last hour, I saw DJ Dallas, who I forgot still exists, signed a 3-year, $8.25 million deal with the Cardinals. There are just so many deals right now. Let's dive in. I have broken it down by the 4 major positions because I thought that was easier. It's hard to try to rank like the biggest signing. So we're going to start at quarterback. Kirk Cousins, a 4-year deal with the Falcons. Got to think it's Kirk is still going to be good, but it's got to be kind of wheels up for Kyle Pitts and Drake London, right?
I mean, they're the big dogs down there. It seems they signed another wide receiver too, didn't they?
Yeah, and we'll get to that in the receivers. They added Darnell Mooney.
Yeah, that's who it was. So, excuse me. But so here's the thing. Cousins has made like $500 million and won one playoff game. Like, it's great work if you can get it. His agent is phenomenal with the double franchise tags, and then I mean, he's a really good quarterback. I don't think, I like to think of quarterbacks in terms of elevators. Some quarterbacks elevate their teams. Some quarterbacks just do good when they have good players. I think Kirk is more of you surround me with a good cast and we're going to do good things, versus someone like Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes that are going to elevate the team, put it on their back, and get it across the line.
I don't know. Taking teams coached by Jay Gruden and Mike Zimmer to the playoffs might prove that he's a little bit of an elevator.
Maybe a little bit. No, I think it's great for London and Pitts should be the top priorities there. Darnell Mooney is going to provide the deep threat. I think he'll get plenty of work as the wide receiver too. And then you've got Bijan and Tyler Algier. They're both. I think we're going to get a lot more Bijan and not as much Algier. The Falcons are set up to make some stuff happen if they can gel. And my big concern with Kirk is coming off that Achilles. Is he going to be able to push off okay to be able to throw? How long is that going to take for him to get back?
Real quick, since you mentioned it, Darnell Mooney goes there. I believe it was 3 years, $39 million, probably the number 2 there for the Falcons and the receivers, we've seen even this last year, Kirk Cousins did pretty well supporting Justin Jefferson, TJ Hawkinson, and a Jordan Addison. Any concerns about Mooney? You see him as kind of a fantasy viable guy again?
Yeah, I think he'll be a flex-worthy player with some, high-end wide receiver 3, low-end wide receiver 2 upside. But for the most part, I'm not going to be looking for a ton of 100-yard games, 2 touchdown games. Mooney's going to be that 3 or 4 catch, with a big play. You're hoping he gets in the end zone. If he can get 6 touchdowns this year, 7 touchdowns, I think that'll be a successful season for him. 850 to 950 yards, 60 or so receptions. I think that feels like a good year for Mooney.
Next up, among the quarterbacks, we had Baker Mayfield, 3-year deal to remain with the Buccaneers. Pretty decent money. Seems like he was happy there. They brought Mike Evans back, kind of keeping that offense intact. I assume you like that move for Tampa Bay.
It feels like that was what was supposed to happen. Evans, I want Mike Evans to retire as a Buccaneer. I want him to get a couple more 1,000-yard seasons. I think Baker gives him a great chance to be able to do that. They're going to run it back with Rachaad White, who will be inefficient on the ground, but good through the air. Cade Otton is a serviceable tight end. You got Chris Godwin. If they can get Godwin and Evans in sync at the same time, my big concern is that they lost Dave Canales to Carolina. I forget who went in there as the OC now. Liam Cohen, former head coach at Kentucky. So the potential is there for that offense to keep clicking under Liam Cohen. And you've got the parts in Godwin, Evans, Rachaad White, and now Baker Mayfield. I think they should probably add a little something to their offensive line. It started to gel the second half of the season, but you want to continue to upgrade that as well.
Next up in the quarterback landscape, Russell Wilson ends up getting a deal, got a 1-year deal, $1.2 million for the Steelers. Broncos paying him about $38 million, so money wasn't really an object. He'll be there competing with Kenny Pickett. I think he probably nod over Kenny Pickett. A 1-year deal gives him a chance to kind of reinvent himself. I would still have him as a low-end QB2. How are you feeling about Wilson?
Yeah, you got to show me something. It's been bad the last couple of years. Seems to have been
not for fantasy. He was QB14 last year. He had 26 touchdowns, only 8 interceptions. He has actually been a high-end QB2 for fantasy in Denver. I don't know if he has as nice of weapons actually now because Steelers today, in a corresponding move or in just a weird move, shipped Deontay Johnson to the Carolina Panthers for a cornerback and a 6th-round pick. So kind of interesting.
So he may have been decent for fantasy, but I just feel like he's been in decline. And like you said, he's going to a situation that may be not quite as good with the weapons. I know Pickens has flashed. I feel like Deontay Johnson was really a security type of player, could get good volume. The Steelers, though, and we'll talk about it when we get to the wide receivers. They've got this thing going on with wide receivers. If I have Wilson as my QB2 in a super flex, I'm keeping my eyes open. Can I upgrade to somebody I maybe feel a little more comfortable with? Maybe somebody that's a little bit younger. I might try to go that route, but he's in that sort of category of quarterbacks. They're either young and unproven or old and on the way down. And you just want to kind of in that, QB 15 to QB 24, there's going to be some shuffling around and it wouldn't surprise me if Russell put up a QB1 season this year. He's got a chip on his shoulder. I know he's got this nice guy act that I'm not going to say he's putting on, but publicly he's always kind of Mr. Positivity. And, but he's got to have a chip on his shoulder. And that's the kind of thing, though, that Mike Tomlin will feed. Hey, everybody else is quitting on you. Let's go show them. We'll show them what's going on. So there, it could be a good year for Russ. Though I would feel better if they still had Deontay Johnson.
Speaking of Deontay Johnson, I like the move for Bryce Young. I think it's good for him down there in Carolina. Probably not great for a potential second-year breakout for Jonathan Mingo. I believe they still have Adam Thielen, too. Those guys, to me, are kind of, deep league flex options at best. I do like Johnson potentially, even being in wide receiver 2 territory. We saw what Dave Canales did with Baker and Mike Evans last year. So gives him something to work with here.
Yeah, I think Deontay Johnson is definitely more proven than what they have going on at this point. Thielen is a husk of himself. Will he be the starter in the slot? Probably, just out of deference. Jonathan Mingo, he has to prove something. He flashed a little bit last year. He's got a lot to prove. It may be, Carolina also went out and signed 2 big old beefy guards as well. And I was listening to Pat Kerwin talk on NFL Network today, and he kept comparing it to what Sean Payton did with Drew Brees. He's like, look, down there in New Orleans, they went out and got these monster beefy interior offensive linemen, and that allowed them to open up throwing lanes for Drew Brees because these guys, could anchor and keep the defenders away and let those lanes develop so he could see downfield. We'll see. I'm not comparing, and I don't think they were comparing. I think it was Jim Miller, maybe, not Pat Kerwin. I don't think they were necessarily comparing Bryce Young to Drew Brees. Just they were talking about, look, this style could be beneficial for him, and what it may be beneficial for is actually Chuba Hubbard.
Another interesting deal, Gardner Minshew. We thought maybe he would get another shot. Gets a 2-year, $25 million deal with the Raiders. Raiders still have Aiden O'Connell. We can't rule out that they would take somebody in the draft. But Minshew was QB 21 last year. You look at that kind of money, that could be solid veteran backup money, or it could be kind of bridge money. If he was the starter, I'd probably have him in a real low-end QB2 kind of ranking too. But what did you think of that signing?
Thought it was weird. Just because I don't know that Minshew, I don't think he's better than Aiden O'Connell. And I don't think Aiden O'Connell is great. I think they're both backup guys that you want for a situation like last year, but it isn't like he came in last year and led the Colts to the playoffs. They played well in stretches and they did some good things, but Minshew is, his issue is primarily that he doesn't know where the limit on his ability is. And he goes and does stuff that gets him in trouble because there are things he can't do. And he will try to run too much or make throws that his arm isn't capable of and throw interceptions. And he embodies, he's got a game manager skill set with a Jameis Winston brain.
What a great combination. Sam Darnold, free agent, signs a 1-year, $10 million deal with the Vikings. Do you think, it's not out of the realm of possibility they're going to draft also. They still have Nick Mullins and Jaron Hall, neither of whom I would like to be turning to. Could this be for Darnold a similar, kind of prove it up situation that we saw for Baker last year?
It could be, but I'm not expecting the same type of results. To me, this feels like a come on down, J.J. McCarthy, Michael Penix type of signing. We're going to bring a veteran in, and yes, if Darnold struggles, the howls will get loud for that first round quarterback. But ideally, I think they would want to have the quarterback sit. And Darnold, you signed him for 1 year. Maybe he goes out and proves something and gets another shot next year. Could he go out and have a Baker Mayfield type of year? He's got Justin Jefferson and TJ Hawkinson and Aaron Jones now, so it's not like they're devoid of weapons.
And Jordan Addison.
and Jordan Addison. So it's not like they're devoid of weapons there.
I still, at best, I put him in a QB3 range, and that's only until we see how draft shakes out. He might end up being kind of a glorified handcuff. But we saw that with Minshew last year. That ended up, if you had held on to Minshew as a hedge, he ended up returning low end startable QB2 value.
Yeah, I mean, Darnold is definitely rosterable in super flex leagues. I expect he's going to get starts and could very likely be the starter for the whole year. But he just, there's as much as I want to see him succeed, there's just parts of the game that I think he just doesn't. It's kind of like with Zach Wilson. There's some pocket awareness that just isn't there that you just can't learn. You either have it or you don't. And I don't think Darnold has it.
This next group of signings, I'm going to kind of group all together and just see if there are any that you feel are important to roster. We saw Mac Jones get traded from the Patriots to the Jaguars for a 6th-round pick. Obviously, they have Trevor Lawrence there. Jameis Winston signs with the Browns. Marcus Mariota, a 1-year deal to go to the Commanders. Jacoby Brissett, a 1-year deal to the Patriots. Drew Lock, a 1-year deal to the Giants. The 49ers brought back Brandon Allen. And Tyrod Taylor signed, I believe, a 1-year deal to the Jets. A lot of these teams talking about needing veteran backups. The only one that kind of stands out to me is not because of his own value, but because of what it means. Marcus Mariota going to the Commanders, we expect they are going to take one of these rookie quarterbacks. They're sitting at number 2. They may even trade up to number 1. You never know. I think that is a real death knell for Sam Howell in Washington. His best hope, if you want to roster him, is probably that he gets traded now.
Yeah, unfortunately, you're probably right. On the flip side of it, Marcus Mariota is awful. And
I mean he's a veteran backup, so
he's not going to threaten your rookie quarterback, but I also don't think he's going to help your rookie quarterback get that much better. I mean, his style right now, I mean, maybe they're planning to take Jaden Daniels at number 2. And because Daniels is athletic and mobile like Mariota, maybe that's the thinking is we'll bring in this mobile guy. Mariota, whatever injury he got to his shoulder in Tennessee, he's just never been able to recover from and get any type of accuracy back. And he wasn't the most accurate quarterback to begin with. So kudos to him for still being in the league and not just, taking his helmet and going home to Hawaii and chilling on the beach. But I like Sam Howell. I think that the concern with Sam Howell, if I'm Washington, is that I don't think Sam Howell is definitely not going to help your rookie quarterback because he thinks he earned the job.
Yeah, and I think of those guys, the only one that I would consider rostering right now is Jameis, and that's only because we've seen Deshaun Watson unable to stay healthy, although it is kind of curious to me that you can have Jameis Winston and Deshaun Watson in the same locker.
That's a hot mess. So I think Jacoby Brissett, he's probably going to be the starter for 6 to 8, maybe 10 games in New England this year. I think especially if they end up having to take Drake May instead of Jaden Daniels, if Drake is there, if Daniels goes 2 and they take May 3rd, I think May has some things he needs to work on. He struggles a little bit with pressure around him, and that impacts his accuracy and his footwork. So while he's got a good arm, I think it's a situation where Jacoby's going to get a shot to start for this year, maybe all year.
You couldn't pay me to put him on my fantasy roster. That's the QBs. Let's move to running backs, and we had some huge movement. Saquon Barkley signs a 3-year, $37.5 million deal with the Eagles. He was running back 8 for the Giants last year. And that was with him missing, I believe, 5 games. I looked at either 4 or 5 games, plus that putrid kind of Giants offense. I think this is a great move. Might be the kind of running back that they would that would help save
That they might actually give
Jalen
a goal
Hurts
line
a little
carry
bit,
to.
especially with Jason Kelsey retiring. I like him to remain an RB1. I think that's a great addition to a good offense. How are you feeling?
I think it's a fantastic addition. I'm looking for a tweet that I saw earlier making reference to where the Giants offensive line ranked the last 3 years versus the Eagles offensive line. And because it was substantially better in Philadelphia. So, I mean, we could see Barkley in for a career year. I know they lost Jason Kelsey. They've got somebody in-house they've already installed at center. Saquon Barkley is still a really exceptional athlete, big, powerful, fast. I agree with you. I think he's going to take some pressure off of Jalen Hurts to run. And I think we saw last year, Jalen got beat up a little bit and it affected his game overall. So let's let Barkley kind of take some of that beating at, 6 foot, 6'1", 235 pounds. We'll let him get out there and do what running backs do and keep our quarterback healthy, because you've got weapons like Goddard and A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. So I love the signing of Barkley in Philadelphia, despite Tiki Barber's pettiness.
Well, I mean, I get if you're Giants for life, seeing a guy go over, but I've seen a couple of moves now of guys basically crossing over in the division, which leads me to our next. I'm going to pair these moves together. The Packers, kind of surprising a lot of folks, myself included, signed Josh Jacobs to a 4-year, $48 million deal. A.J. Dillon was already a free agent. In a corresponding move, they released Aaron Jones, who turned around today and signed a 1-year, $7 million deal with the Vikings. I'll start with Jacobs first. I think he's a good 3-down kind of talent. I could see him taking over the workload of what they were giving to both Jones and Dillon. It's a good young offense. I think he has RB1 upside for me. Aaron Jones, I probably still like as an RB2. I think he'll be splitting probably with Ty Chandler, but he's the better back, and we saw him in the playoffs, 200-yard games. He's still got something left.
So Josh Jacobs has the RB1 upside. I know the Packers just lost Bakhtiari. He retired finally. But honestly, for the last couple years since that leg injury, he's really been a shell of himself when he did play. So they do need to add some beef to that offensive line. But Josh Jacobs, I mean, it makes great sense if you've got the cap space, because their wide receivers are young, their quarterback is young, their tight ends are young. Let's add a weapon. They're going to stick with the backups that they have, and because you don't need to have somebody that can split time. Aaron Jones, for as good as he is and as productive as he can be, really needed to have somebody to take some of the load from him, and that was A.J. Dillon. And despite the fact that A.J. Dillon could be terribly ineffective at times, if you wanted to keep Aaron Jones healthy, and even then it was no guarantee that you could keep him healthy, you had to give some of those touches to somebody else, and that somebody else was A.J. Dillon. I don't think you'll need to do that with Josh Jacobs. Jacobs can handle 20-plus touches a game, and I think he's going to be okay, and he's still, just 25 years old going into his sixth season?
Well, and Jacobs didn't have a lot of heavy college usage either, and he only had really one heavy usage season with the Raiders, so he doesn't have as many miles as some of these guys do. Next up in running back roulette, and huge running back movement, kind of as time we've talked, this draft class maybe not great at running back. The free agent class was, and people pounced. A lot of these went, boom, boom right away. Tony Pollard leaving the Cowboys, 3-year, $24 million deal with the Titans. He'll pair with Tyjae Spears there. I think we saw last year Pollard was RB14, but really we kind of got he is not a 3-down workhorse back, probably does better as part of a committee a little bit. Changing schemes there in Tennessee. I know a lot of people are talking about they're a ground and pound. They were with Mike Vrabel, but now you get Brian Callahan, who was offensive coordinator in Tennessee. They may not have exceptional passing game weapons at the moment, although they do have DeAndre Hopkins and maybe potential in Treylon. You know, I could see it being a decent move for Tony Pollard. I could still see him returning, low-end RB2 value. I think Spears is going to be pretty involved. I like him still in the RB3. I think they split, and neither of them is incredible. Do you feel different?
No, I think you're spot on with the low-end RB2, mid RB3. I think Spears could potentially have a little more upside, but we've seen that Pollard's most successful if he's in that receiving role. He played wide receiver in college. He can run the ball effectively. He just can't do it 20 times a game. So if Pollard's getting 8 to 10 carries, Spears is getting 10 to 15 carries, Pollard's getting 6 to 8 targets, and Spears is getting 2, 3, 4 targets, I think that's how you see it's that backfield split up, and they can both be productive. The reality of the situation, though, is that targets are more valuable than carries, and so that's why Pollard ends up being the higher ranked of the two. Would it shock me if it flips the other way and Spears just establishes himself and earns more touches? It wouldn't. But given the condition of that receiving core, the opportunity is going to be there for Tony Pollard to earn targets. And they paid him, $6 million a year. That's, Miles Sanders money.
Which didn't work out that well for Sanders last year. We'll see if it's.
But it takes Sanders a year or so to get climatized.
We shall see. Next up, DeAndre Swift signing a 3-year, $24.5 million deal with the Chicago Bears. And I did not know what to make of this. Swift ended up as RB20 last year. Actually stayed healthier last year in Philadelphia than he kind of had been throughout a lot of his Detroit career, but they still have Khalil Herbert, albeit in a contract year, and Roschon Johnson coming into his second year. I feel like all three of those guys are going to get used. On the plus side, Shane Waldron, the new offensive coordinator, ran sort of a more run-heavy approach in Seattle. I like Swift probably the best of the committee. Maybe he's got RB2 value. I might feel better about him in RB3 range. And I'm starting to get concerned if I'm holding Herbert about long-term value because he's probably a diminished role this year. And then he's a free agent. And who knows what happens.
So Herbert doesn't have any long-term value. He was the quintessential #2 to 3 year window guy. And the windows just cracked open now. I think Roschon is going to eat into the running back shares because he's got a year under his belt. He's more comfortable. He's the bigger back. DeAndre Swift has decent size at 209. Swift is the most talented of the running backs there. He's going to get a good share. I think that Herbert – so DeAndre Swift can do everything that Khalil Herbert can better. And DeAndre Swift is as good a pass catcher as Roschon Johnson, may not be as good a pass protector, but he also doesn't, Roschon's got 15 or 20 pounds on him. I like it for DeAndre Swift because they're at some point, the cream rises to the top. And as much as I'm a Deontay Foreman stan, DeAndre Swift is better than the 3 backs they had there last year and better than the 2 backs that are left there now. He had a career high in carries last year with 229, career high in yards with 1,049, and a career low in targets and receptions. So we know he's caught 78 passes in the season before, 62 with 78 targets. So he can earn targets. I think we're 99% sure it's going to be Caleb Williams under center to start the year. And he's going to need somebody he can count on. I think DeAndre Swift is going to be that guy, along with DJ Moore and Cole Kmet. And didn't they just sign a tight end, Gerald Everett?
Yeah, they signed Gerald Everett. That doesn't do a lot for me in fantasy.
Yeah.
I don't know if that does.
But they need another wide receiver, and maybe another offensive lineman. But I like DeAndre Swift. I think I'd probably have him. I think he can be a mid RB2.
Next up, Derrick Henry goes to the Ravens on a 2-year, $16 million deal. He's older back, so for Dynasty, probably still in the RB2 range. But in that offense, if they let him be a pounder, he could have RB1 upside in fantasy.
I mean, we've seen what Gus Edwards could do in that offense. And
yeah, Gus Edwards, I was going to mention this because he finished as RB25 as the leader of that. But last year, Derrick Henry, despite missing a few games, was actually RB8. He missed one full game. He was RB8 with not an exceptional Tennessee offense.
It's I don't expect. So here's the thing: is that you just can't go into the season expecting a ton of efficiency out of Derrick Henry. But you also can't not expect him to get some volume. And that offense is going to use him to do what he does, which is run the ball. They're going to throw it to Mark Andrews. Zay Flowers has stepped up. And it's going to be Lamar and Derrick Henry. It's going to be a very narrow funnel. Excuse me. I love Keaton Mitchell, but I just don't think he's going to get enough volume to be relevant. He's a guy that
I'm not even sure he's back next year. He tore his ACL in week 15.
So if he's not back, it's probably better for him.
Well, at least not back anytime, before late in the season. So I don't know that that's a huge factor. Next up, we had Austin Eckler signs a 2-year, $11 million deal with the Commanders. Commanders still have, they brought in Anthony Lynn, who's going to be the running game coordinator. They have Cliff Kingsbury to run offense. Brian Robinson Jr. still there, was actually RB21 last year and did catch passes and run the ball. Eckler was RB26 last year, missed 4 weeks, and, wasn't incredibly efficient. Last year, Washington also had Gibson, who finished as Antonio Gibson, who finished as running back 39. I don't like this really for Eckler's top end value or for Brian Robinson. I think they eat into each other. Both of them can catch passes, though Eckler's probably the better pass catcher. Both of them can run the ball, although I expect Robinson's probably more of the first and second down work. I don't think either of them comes above an RB3 for me.
Yeah, so Eckler looked like he was shot last year. If he comes out this year and has a good year, looks springy and spry. I mean, sometimes it just happens. And so maybe he spent the off season, cold tubbing and doing yoga, and he's going to come into the season all fresh and ready to go. Maybe he went to Europe and got some PRP treatment. Maybe he went and hung out with Aaron Rodgers in a dark ayahuasca room or something. I don't know. But he didn't. He looked shot last year.
Yeah.
Nothing screams I want to win a title by going to one of the worst teams in the league.
Yeah. Next up, I'm going to pair these two because it was kind of a corresponding move. Zach Moss signs a 2-year deal with the Cincinnati Bengals, where he will pair with Chase Brown. And I say only pair with Chase Brown because in a corresponding move, Joe Mixon was then traded to the Houston Texans. Mixon was actually RB6 last year, wasn't incredibly efficient behind that line, maybe has lost a little bit, but I still think he has potential RB1 upside in that Houston Texans offense, and at least should be a decent RB2. I thought that was a good find for Houston. Zach Moss was RB31 last year. I feel like that's pretty close to peak expectations. I like maybe him in a RB3 and Chase Brown and kind of an RB4. I don't think there's going to be enough for those guys to both be great, especially if Burrow is back and they're slinging the ball.
Yeah. So Zach Moss is going to be the run out the clock guy, the short yardage guy. I think on a bottom half team, he's a guy that could earn a starting job and get decent volume. Cincinnati isn't a bottom half team. They're going to throw the ball. They've got, I get it. T. Higgins is demanding a trade. If they're not going to trade him, they're going to.
Speaking of this, did you see the latest rumors that they're trying to trade T. Higgins for Justin Jefferson to pair Justin Jefferson with Jamar Chase?
I got to be honest. That would be fantastic.
Yes, and they signed Mike Gesicki to a 1-year tight end deal, and I still think he's a decent pass catcher too. And if they don't have like a real deep receiver room, but they have those two big guys on the outside and him in the middle.
Yeah, they're a pass first team, and I don't think Zach Moss gets the volume that Joe Mixon got. I think Chase Brown came on and showed enough, is going to provide the explosive component to the offense. Could I see a 60-40 split between Moss and Brown? Sure. I could also see them splitting at 60-40 and finishing back-to-back in your fantasy rankings just because Brown's able to put up the explosive plays. So I don't hate Zach Moss signing there. I don't think he's as good as Joe Mixon. I don't think he's going to produce like Joe Mixon. And I do think they like Chase Brown plenty. As far as Joe Mixon, like he landed in a phenomenal spot. We heard they had told him they were going to release him, and I don't know why more teams when they hear a guy is going to get released and they're like, hey, this guy could help us, why they don't go trade for them. Why do they always, and granted, they probably have to, they're going to have to take on Mixon's contract. If you trade for him, you got to take on the contract, but you can also negotiate some of that stuff too. If you get the team, if they're going to cut him, they're going to end up with $5 million in dead cap. And you're like, hey, well, why don't you cover $4 million of that? And we'll trade for him, and you'll get an extra $1 million for your salary cap. Those types of deals.
Give a shout out to Nick Caserio, who got handed I'm going to say kind of a shit sandwich there. And for a couple of years, it did not look good, but now they are potentially rolling in with a great young head coach, CJ Stroud, Tank Dell, Nico Collins, Dalton Schultz, and Joe Mixon, which is a pretty good offensive core, and some good defenders. Yeah. Well, plus they have a great defensive-minded coach, Meanwhile, other teams in their division have taken, we'll talk about Jacksonville's big signing in a minute, but I like what they're doing in Houston. And
it's amazing because it feels like we were calling for them to clean house in the front office. And so it seems literally like the problem was Jack Easterby. And, now that he's gone, Caserio's like, all right, we got this lunatic out of here. Let me get down to the nuts and bolts of building a football team for you.
Next up among running backs, the guy who left Houston, that's Devin Singletary, finished as RB32 last year, signs a 3-year, $19.5 million deal with the Giants. He is paired again with Brian Daboll, who he worked with in Buffalo. I think it's not a bad signing. I mean, nothing was going to replace Saquon Barkley. I also think the Giants are probably a prime candidate to pick up a running back in the draft. But I could see Singletary continuing to have running back 3 value there.
Yeah, I think the familiarity is going to be good. I saw, and I don't know if it was um, a rogue account with no real insider information. I saw a tweet come along that said basically that Wesley Steinberg, the Giants are set to release Daniel Jones and designate him a post June 1 cut. Wesley Steinberg, he's an NFL and New York Giants insider, ASMSR sports representative. He's got 15,000 followers. So I don't know how legit that is.
We'll see. I mean, it certainly seems like they've been kicking the tires, but they're probably in a place. If they released Jones, I think their first round pick's definitely quarterback.
Well, I'm not hanging my hat on Drew Lock all of a sudden.
Well, no, he's not the guy. Neither is Tommy DeVito.
Right. No, Singletary, he's probably an RB3 with some RB2 upside occasionally. We'll see what happens. I know Eric Gray was kind of relegated to special teams duty, but he flashed in college. He had a good college career. I don't think Gary Brightwell is anything special, and they've got one other cat there that I can't remember, so probably can't remember him for a reason.
They had a veteran who had also played in Buffalo. I'm trying to think. But I think he's a free agent, which is why we blanked on it. We'll think of it at some point in time. Next up among the deals, 3-year, $17.25 million deal for Antonio Gibson signing with the Patriots. He was RB39 last year. I think he's a decent pass-catching specialist. To me, this just probably takes the top off of Ramondre Stevenson.
I think that Gibson... I just don't know that he's going to reach any type of potential. He played wide receiver in college. He's got good size, and he ends up, we want to see him make explosive plays, but he doesn't have good vision. Yeah, he can run some routes and he can get out there. I agree. I don't think it's great for Ramondre Stevenson.
Yeah, in 2022, he really reached his peak value because of all the receptions. And I imagine that's what Gibson signing hurts him the most there. Gibson was 39 last year, so it would have been a top end RB4. I feel like that's probably the best you can hope for.
Yeah.
Next up, Gus Edwards signs a 2-year deal with the Chargers. Gus actually was RB25 last year. They still have Isaiah Spiller. I think the Chargers are still a candidate to draft a running back, but he gets paired back with Greg Roman. I could see some RB3 or low-end RB2 value for Gus, if he gets a chance to lead that backfield.
Yeah, if he gets the volume, I think he'll be productive. I just don't know that he's going to get the volume. It feels like, he's not, to be fair, he's not going to lose the volume to Isaiah Spiller, but it does feel like they could bring in
you don't know that.
Or Trey Benson and what's that?
You don't know that.
Yeah. Well, people will tell you there's damn little I know. But I just don't think, I feel like if Gus was going to be, that big time starting back, or even just a starting back of, Devin Singletary proportion, we'd have seen it by now.
Do you think the Chargers wait a little bit later in the draft and take Blake Corum? Because that's been a lot of the discussion.
So it's easy to link your former players to you when you make the college to NFL jump. I think honestly, if they draft a running back, I feel like they're going to go with one of the good ones, like Trey Benson or Jonathan Brooks, one that can do that's more suited to the NFL.
My favorite hot stove rumor was that Jim Harbaugh was looking to trade Justin Herbert so he could take J.J. McCarthy at pick 5. And I thought that's not why he came to the NFL. Probably. I'm going to pair these last two together. Nyheim Hines gets a 1-year deal with the Browns. TJ Dallas, as I mentioned, a 3-year, $8.25 million deal with the Cardinals. I think Hines probably helping them with special teams. He was more of a kick returner where he was in Buffalo. Neither of these guys strikes me as somebody I'm going to be rostering in fantasy.
Yeah, they're both special teams players.
Moving on to wide receivers, Michael Pittman had the franchise tag, signs a 3-year, $71.5 million deal for the Colts. I love this for Pittman and for the Colts. Glad he gets a little security. I have him as a wide receiver 1 still.
Yeah, he's ascended to that. He's not quite elite. He's in tier 2, tier 3, somewhere in there. I've got to sort out my tiers. I mean, part of the biggest challenge with Pittman is going to be, is he going to be able to lock in the volume? And he's the top dog there, but I think sometimes there's some fear when you have a big athletic quarterback like Anthony Richardson or a stud running back like Jonathan Taylor, that you may have these games where they only throw it 22 times. And if that happens 3, 4, 5 times, it could really affect Pittman's value.
You mentioned earlier, T. Higgins said he wanted to be traded, also franchise tag. Do you think he will be?
I don't think he'll be traded. I don't think they're going to sign him to a long-term deal. But it doesn't. I'm not sure the value of him throwing a hissy fit and sitting out. Maybe he misses some camp and signs his franchise tag right before camp or right before the season starts. I mean, the dude he's a top 20 wide receiver in the NFL. The Bengals know it. That's why they signed. That's why they're like, hey, you're not going anywhere this year. We'll pay you the average of the top 5 players. We're good with that. He wants a long-term career, a long-term contract. He wants to be the top dog. Ain't going to happen this year, bud.
Another huge deal. Jaguars signed Gabe Davis to a 3-year, $50 million deal. Though it hasn't happened yet, it's still rumored that they are looking at re-signing Calvin Ridley as well. I wasn't super pumped on the Gabe Davis fantasy experience, even when I thought he might be their Calvin Ridley replacement. I'd be less pumped if you're also mixing them in. I would also be less pumped for Calvin Ridley's fantasy value and Zay Jones' fantasy value.
So it feels like Gabe Davis is the Zay Jones replacement. And they're going to have somebody else on the outside. It's going to be Christian Kirk. So maybe they go with Zay Jones and Gabe Davis on the outside, in which case it's wheels up for Christian Kirk. He may catch 180 balls. Gabe Davis, he is who he is. He's a big receiver that, has blow up games and disappears sometimes. He got himself a great deal. He's playing with what I think is a really good quarterback. Is Trevor as good as Josh Allen? I don't think so. He hasn't shown it yet. But Trevor has all the traits to be an exceptional quarterback. Let's see if they put it all together this year.
Next up, the Seahawks restructured Tyler Lockett's deal to keep him there for 2 more years, which means he, DK Metcalf, and JSN all set to return. To me, all this kind of did was still potentially cap JSN's upside.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if JSN kind of pushed his way into the wide receiver 2 there behind DK Metcalf. I think it makes it, he restructured to make it more affordable for him to be the wide receiver 3. That way, you don't have your fans going, man, we're paying this guy $18 million and they're not even using him. Well, if you're paying him $7 million, you're like, well, he is our wide receiver 3. So it ends up being, it does cap JSN a little bit. I don't think it caps. It doesn't cap it as much as Geno Smith caps it.
You know what they also did? They brought back Noah Fant on a 2-year.
They did. Well, you got to have a tight end.
Everybody is back. The question is, can you have a more up-tempo passing offense with Geno Smith? And is that what they're going to do?
Maybe we'll see. They brought in the University of Washington offensive coordinator, and he's going to install a new offense up there under Mike McDonald. There is a level of excitement with something new. The offense has weapons. If they can protect the quarterback with Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet, Noah Fant, DK Metcalf, JSN, and Tyler Lockett, there's no reason that team should not score points. And if the team scores points, we score points.
I have to tell you, I was a little sad that Fant ended up back there. I hoped he was going to go someplace with a little more maybe fantasy upside potential. Speaking of former Broncos, the Broncos traded Jerry Jeudy to the Browns for a 5th and 6th round pick. To me, this, Jeudy and Moore probably eat into each other's value. And when we mentioned there might be an opportunity for Cedric Tillman, just kidding.
Honestly, I don't know. I think that Jeudy and Moore do kind of cannibalize each other, and it may open up opportunities for Tillman, because if Moore can't ascend and Jeudy can't catch, it feels like.
I guess the real question, can the Browns really support 3 strong fantasy assets? Because you figured Njoku's not going anywhere, and they still have Amari Cooper. I would still have those as my top 2 plays, and I honestly don't know if I'm feeling confident playing. Well, personally, I never feel confident playing Jerry Jeudy. As I put on the sheet, they traded the husk of Jerry Jeudy for some magic beans. But I don't know if I kind of liked what Elijah Moore did, but if you looked at his overall numbers, that was real boomer bust, hit or miss. If you was a deep league flex, some weeks, hey, thank God I got some good points. And some weeks I was like, hey, maybe I should have started somebody else. If you have 2 guys in that, does that make it any better?
Kevin Stefanski at his heart wants to run the ball. And I think that's really that offensive construction is going to limit the deeper wide receivers on the Browns as it is. It's going to be you're not going to start Jeudy or Moore or Tillman with any confidence whatsoever this year.
I mean, you could have stopped for me. You're not going to start Jeudy. Because I'm not. But to me, if you find somebody who's still a true believer, there are a few I've seen pop up on Twitter who think this, means wheels up. We're finally going to get a wide receiver 1 Jerry Jeudy season. Sell him for everything you can get. 49ers placed a 2nd round tender on Juwan Jennings. I think this just probably means he'll be back next year. I don't imagine anyone's going to want to pay that price for him.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
The 49ers putting the 2nd round tender on Juwan Jennings. I think
Yeah, he's a guy you can keep affordably. He's a glue guy. He's like the Dennis Rodman of the 49ers wide receiver core without all the drama.
The Buccaneers declined the option for Russell Gage, making him a free agent. I kind of thought he would not end up being back. I don't really see him having much of a market. Do you?
I don't. I think it ends up, Trey Palmer is going to step in to that wide receiver 3 role. They like Cade Otton. It's Evans and Godwin.
Here's a group of guys that all kind of signed low money deals to go to teams. I think most of them were 1-year contracts. Isaiah McKenzie goes to the Giants, reunited with Brian Daboll. Devontae Parker was released by the Patriots, signed a 1-year deal with the Eagles. Definitely not cracking that starting lineup. Texans re-signed Noah Brown to a 1-year deal. He looked good at times, probably at best wide receiver 3 there. And then Jalen Reagor re-signs with the Patriots on a 1-year deal. None of those guys really move the needle for me in fantasy. Is there any that catches your eye?
Yeah, McKenzie and Reagor are special teamer gadget guys. Devontae Parker is a deep roster veteran chasing a ring. Noah Brown, he's a guy that if I'm the Texans, he's out there. He's doing the dirty work. He's shown he can be reliable. If you need him to step up and be your one for a game or two, he showed that he can do that. He doesn't really have the skill or the talent to do that for 17 games. I love Noah Brown. He's a former Buckeye. He's like 6-year breakout. You got to roll with him, but he's going to go out there and he'll crack some heads on the edge and free up your running back. He'll catch a pass over the middle. He's a big dude. He's like 6'2", 220. So I think that was a smart move for the Texans. I don't think he's fantasy relevant unless, like last season, they got a bunch of injuries.
Before we get out of here, I'm going to move to the tight end position. I already talked about Fant's deal. I'm going to tick off all of these kind of tight end signings we got and see if any of them sparks an interest for you. Drew Sample, a 3-year deal to return to the Bengals, but then they also signed Mike Gesicki to a 1-year deal. I would suspect Gesicki is the receiver, Sample probably more of the blocker. Rams signed Colby Parkinson, another former Seahawk tight end, to a 3-year deal. The Falcons signed Charlie Warner to a 3-year deal. Irv Smith gets a 1-year deal with the Chiefs, just despite my prediction that Noah Gray might have a bigger role. Gerald Everett, a 2-year, $12 million deal with the Bears. Interesting because of the years and the money, but I still like Kmet better. And then Will Dissly signing with the Chargers. If I had to pick one, still the one that interests me is Mike Gesicki, because I've not given up hope that in the right situation, we're going to see flashes of what he was in 2021 and 2022.
Yeah, this is a tough group, man. I'm okay to roster Gesicki. I don't think he's going to be worth starting at all. I think if I was going to grab one of these guys and hope to be able to start them occasionally, the guy that I would grab is probably Will Dissly. He's had some big games here and there. He's a 3-down tight end. He isn't overly athletic, but he's got great size. I think he provides consistency that Donald Parham doesn't from the tight end position, whereas Parham provides really good athleticism. But I think Dissly will end up being the starter there in Los Angeles. And it wouldn't surprise me if he caught 50 balls this year, 45.
Well, that'll be a wrap on today. Just a lot of deals and movement. And like I said, the league year officially starts tomorrow. On Friday, we will be back talking more news. Justin Fields, still rumors. They're getting closer to a deal, trading him. Still some names out there. Curious where Calvin Ridley, Marquise Brown will land. If we don't get a lot more big offensive players, maybe I can compile a list of some of the big defensive moves that we just haven't gotten to yet. And then Dennis and I will be doing looking at a 2-round NFL mock draft on Friday. So a lot of fun stuff coming. It is very exciting. It almost feels like football is back, even though we have 6 months. But if you are
the whole time, boss,
if you are jonesing for that next hit of free agent news, Dennis, what can the people do to fill their time?
Head out to your favorite podcast platform, hit that search button, find the Fantasy Football Roundtable podcast. We were number 58 in Great Britain last week, up 20 spots. We were 128 in Canada. It was a banner week for us.
Hey.
Hit that subscribe, that download button. Give us those listens. At least give us the downloads. You don't have to listen. Give us the downloads. Keep those numbers up for us. We need that ego boost.
That'll do it for us today. We'll find out if Dennis and I get traded and or signed to a new team when we come back on Friday. Until then, you guys have a wonderful week.